Chapter 96 Purification completed. In the sky, Regilas watched from a distance to avoid the effects of the foul cloud spell. However, this distance made his vision slightly blurry. After Hawthorne cut Kent's neck with a sword, Regilas realized belatedly that the warrior he had placed high hopes on had fallen under the human's blade. Looking at the miserable situation below, he couldn't help but feel angry and spat out in frustration. In his heart, he cursed, "Truly the most despicable human race, always producing such useless and incompetent waste. They possess so much power and strong equipment, yet they can't even defeat a human who is much lower in level and age than themselves. You deserve to go to hell and forever be my slave." He cursed angrily, but as he looked down at the battlefield, he hesitated, his eyes flickering, weighing whether or not to go down and personally eliminate this human, and retrieve the illusionist's armguard and storm warhammer. But he was still worried about another person's threat, because there was a paladin in this lumberyard. His gaze was cast towards the corner of the lumberyard, where Anno, with his eyes widened and gritting his teeth, was desperately trying to see the current situation on the battlefield, which was obscured by smoke. Although there was little firelight in the lumberyard, she could only rely on the light and shadows to barely judge the current situation. However, this still couldn't restrain her desire to participate in the battlefield. Regilas is most afraid of this girl. If he hadn't discovered that there was still a paladin here, he would have taken matters into his own hands and resolved everything. From the moment the paladins set foot on this career path, they possessed the ability bestowed upon them by order, the ability called Divine Perception. Its function is to perceive the location of all undead creatures, demons, and creatures from other realms in their surroundings when activated, and can accurately determine its category. Regilas cannot guarantee whether this girl currently possesses this ability, and how extensive her perception range is. If she really drives and perceives that there are demons active in the lumberyard, inferring that the Nine Hells has set up a lot of things in the Port of Libel, then report to the Black Wand Tower and conduct a more in-depth investigation throughout the city. Many of my previous arrangements are likely to be exposed, and the losses will be much greater than what can be gained tonight. After all, I have worked so hard in secret for a long time, just to divert the attention of the Black Cane Tower to this cult that worships monsters. As long as this wild cult is destroyed tonight and all the people involved are killed, then all the previous sins can be attributed to them, thus clearing the suspicions of the true collaborators. This plan is specifically designed to protect their other strongholds, so we cannot afford to fail here. Damn! Incompetent Kuntz! Hateful paladin! Deep down, I cursed these two people again. In the end, Regilas still didn't choose to take the risk. With a wave of his coat, his whole body turned into a white light and teleported away. And at this moment, below. Is this the feeling of killing someone up close with your own hands? Hawthorne was unsure, facing the gushing blood, the terrified face of Kent's, and the slowly falling corpse. He only felt his heart pounding like a drum, his ears almost deaf, and his hands trembling, barely able to hold on to his weapon. "Master, the butterfly has been suppressed, come and purify her." Later, Heidi suddenly called out, bringing his almost terrified soul back into his body. "I understand, I'll come right away." Knowing that his crisis was not truly over, he gritted his teeth and suppressed the immense fear and trembling in his heart. He picked up the storm warhammer from the ground, turned around, and charged straight towards the butterfly. At this moment, this side is also a scene of devastation. Heidi and Butterfly are fighting, depleting their magic power, and now they are almost out of mana. Yuta, relying on the slow spell's effect, had to give up some of his dodging energy in order to quickly dismantle the statue. As a result, he had to endure several colorful balls from the cultists, and now he is covered in injuries. Fortunately, thanks to their desperate efforts, the statue has been completely dismantled and the remaining cultists have been killed. Now, there is only one leader left for the butterfly, and they are in a nearly depleted state. It can be imagined that a huge and sluggish monster, with a movement speed even slower than that of children, and can only rely on spells to fight, would be in a posture of being easily manipulated. "Master, you can go straight up." Heidi gasped for breath and shouted. Hawthorne, suppressing his fatigue, strode forward and sensed the situation inside the storm hammer. He cursed silently at the waste, as all the energy inside had been squandered without leaving a single charge for himself. He couldn't help but complain in his heart, but now is not the time to resent these things. Since the warhammer has lost its greatest effectiveness and he no longer has magic, he just takes this thing and charges forward, then throws it fiercely. Swoosh! The hammer rotated forward and landed in front of the butterfly, barely catching her attention. It caused her body's cilia to sway for a moment, as if in anger. Hawthorne, on the other hand, slightly circled around her and leaped from her side, grabbing onto a whip, using both hands and feet, stepping on the patterns on her body, and then climbed onto her. He held on tight and silently said, "Purify." Buzz. So, the misty white light reappeared, instantly enveloping her entire body. Ah! The mouthparts of the butterfly let out another painful cry, and then the cilia on its body began to wave, entangling Hawthorne's ankles, trying to pull him down. Fortunately, her physical strength is not strong. Hawthorne barely resisted this pulling force, continuously exerting her purifying power, completely eliminating the impurities and sins within her body. Buzz. Finally, the wailing of the monster completely disappeared, and her consciousness fell into a deep sleep, indicating that her soul had been thoroughly purified. And until this moment, the power of purification finally began to gradually take effect on her physical body. Her massive body started to slowly contract, gradually transforming, ultimately shrinking down to the ground, becoming the appearance of a nun lying on the ground, asleep and unawakened. The purified white light slowly extinguished, marking the successful completion of this purification. Hawthorne climbed up from the ground and helped the sleeping butterfly up, finally feeling relieved. Fortunately, a smooth landing. No matter how many unexpected things happened in between, at least, the original purpose of this trip, which is to quietly purify the butterfly, has been accomplished. Since that's the case, then it's time to wrap things up. Chapter 97, The Threat of the Holy Night. With that in mind, Hawthorne then took out a spellbook from his waist pouch and threw it to Heidi, weakly saying, "Heidi, go check on Ekta. She should be fine, but she should be awakened." The book records the spell, healing technique. Although Ekta was hit by a storm warhammer, his injuries shouldn't be that severe. A little bit of treatment should be enough to fully heal him. Heidi responded without refusal, then said to the mosquito hovering near her ear, "Andy, come here and use this book to treat the injured Ekta." Obviously, her mana is now difficult to sustain, so she can only rely on other witches to cast spells in order to heal the unconscious Ekta. Unfortunately, as the weakest witch in the entire monastery, Andini hasn't engaged in much combat and has very little magic left. I'm afraid it's not possible. Chui Bizi, how much magic do you have left? At the entrance of the lumberyard, Chui Bizi walked in slowly and helped Ekta, who was in a coma. She looked very helpless and said, "I am the one who has consumed the most. I released such a large area of poisonous mist. How could I have the energy to treat her? Yuta, do you also have very little magic power left?" After explaining this, she then asked loudly. However, in the distance, Yuta also had a troubled expression. "The limitations of the slow spell are too great. I have been using magic to accelerate myself just now, in order to counter its effects." Seeing that each witch was powerless, Hawthorne couldn't help but sigh. Is it really true that no one can find a way to save the unconscious Ekta? He said this. Suddenly, from a dark corner, an excited female voice came. "I can do it. Where are the wounded? I can treat her." Hawthorne turned his head upon hearing the sound, but found it difficult to see clearly. So, he recited a spell and released a light spell, which allowed him to see some more things with the help of the bright light. For example, the bodies of investigators whose skulls were opened and their entire brains removed. The bloody scene shocked his eyes and almost made him vomit. "Damn, can't look, can't look." Forcing himself to shift his gaze, he continued to look in the direction of the sound source. Only then did he see a blonde girl, her body bound with a rope, her hair and face dirty, but still unable to hide her natural beauty and good figure. With an anxious look in her eyes, she continued to shout, "Hey, I'm here. Come quickly." Immediately, Hawthorne himself was shocked. Damn, the fact that beautiful girl adventurers explode in the monster's lair is not just a twisted game element, but actually a real background setting. I have just destroyed the lair of a cultist, and it took less than a month for them to establish it. Yet, there are still captive young female adventurers here, waiting for me to rescue them. Sigh. He thought this way, then waved his hand and responded loudly, understood. Saying that, he handed the unconscious butterfly to Heidi beside him to take care of, and he himself quickly stepped forward. Heidi, Yuta, and Aini, clean up the battlefield, remember to destroy some things that may be related to the butterfly and us. Chui Bizi, take Ekta with you and come with me to take a look. After saying this, he took 2 quick steps and approached them before suddenly realizing and asking, who are you? Although it is likely that the other person is not a bad person, it is still more appropriate to ask. Norton felt a wave of humiliation, but still had to grit his teeth and answer, we are an investigation team sent by the Black Wand Tower, specifically to investigate the tragedy that occurred on the night of the twin moons. We were captured here because we fell into the clutches of these cultists' conspiracy and ambush. She explained weakly, trying to exaggerate the ambush she had suffered in order to save herself from embarrassment. But the more she spoke, the more she felt her face burning, feeling utterly ashamed. Hawthorne breathed a sigh of relief. So that's how it is. Ah, you all have suffered. Great, these people are safe and the cult has been destroyed. We can report to the higher-ups, and our own monastery is also secure. Thinking like this, watching the group of investigators from the Black Cane Tower rolling their eyes, foaming at the mouth, and falling in all directions on the ground, he couldn't help but feel sympathy in his heart, and then sincerely sighed. These cultists are truly despicable, actually subjecting you to such inhumane torture, turning them into these half-human, half-ghost beings. Following behind him, Chui Baisi nodded repeatedly, yes, cultists are really despicable. Anno gritted his teeth and finally defended himself. It's not the cultists who intentionally tortured them, but someone deliberately released poisonous gas to suffocate them. Hawthorne suddenly realized and nodded repeatedly, these believers actually use foul odor to deliberately torture prisoners, it's truly insane. Quibisi looked up and said, yes, cultists are truly despicable. Anaton suddenly felt powerless and had no choice but to give up, with a look of, whatever you say is what it is, no longer entangled in this topic. Can you let us go? Hawthorne didn't waste any more time and went forward to untie her. The girl stood up, dusted off her hands, and despite the dirt on her face and hair, she still looked beautiful. She then extended her hand to him in a straightforward manner and said, hello, brave mage. My name is Anno M. Kasla, a paladin and the captain of the investigation team sent by the Blackstaff Tower. Very grateful for your rescue. May I ask for your honorable surname and name? Immediately, Hawthorne's movements froze. Saint. Knight? I thought it would be a warrior or a mage knight or something, but it turns out to be a paladin. Will she, in fact, have already noticed? Noticing that he looked off, and suddenly had a puzzled expression. Yeah, what's wrong? Hawthorne quickly restrained his expression and assumed a serious posture. It's nothing, just. Have you noticed anything unusual, Your Excellency? Please use your perception ability. After all, the methods of monsters are often quite diverse, while my own methods are rather limited. I am also afraid that she may not have been completely eliminated, but instead found a way to escape. His eyes were fixed on the girl in front of him, and he had made up his mind. If this female paladin saw through the true nature of their monsters, then no matter what, he had to leave her life here. Even if it will bring great trouble later, it only needs to be dealt with afterwards, whether by framing and blaming the cultists or by exposing Regilas in advance. In any case, the biggest secret of the monastery must absolutely not be revealed. Witches are their closest people, they absolutely cannot have any mishaps. Chapter 98, Anno and Porter. Hawthorne was so nervous, but Anno just smiled slightly and said, Sir is indeed cautious, but this time Sir is worrying too much. Since the beginning of the battle just now, I have been constantly focused, using divine perception, to detect every move around me. Speaking of this, she put on a very confident expression and tone, so I am very certain that the evil, brain-shaped giant monster has been completely destroyed, leaving no trace at all. Her performance seemed to suggest that all his worries were unnecessary. However, Hawthorne still felt a bit uneasy, nodding slowly with caution and saying, "Well then, all right. So, Ikeda sisters, I leave it to you." He said this, gesturing for Cui Bizi to lift Hector up. The witches also heard the conversation and sensed Hawthorne's mood, so they gathered around, looking at Anno with vigilant eyes. And the latter, oblivious to this, placed their hand on Ekta's shoulder and silently recited, "Lay on hands." A gentle golden light shone, and the healing divine power continuously flowed into Ekta's body. After a few seconds, the poor witch who had been knocked unconscious by the storm warhammer slowly woke up, her eyes filled with confusion. "Ah, I." Hawthorne finally breathed a sigh of relief, and his heart settled back in his stomach. "Ah, Hector sisters, it's best that you are safe." Fortunately, after the purification, it seems that the evil nature of the witch has indeed changed. At the very least, the holy perception of the paladins no longer identifies them as enemies, and holy healing does not harm them. And all of this still has Anno, this genuine and true knight, as a witness. In this way, one can completely relax. He thought this way and saw a slight smile on Anno's face in front of him. The abilities of a holy knight are unique and cannot be impersonated. Hawthorne was taken aback, then suddenly realized, and couldn't help but smile bitterly in his heart. This girl actually thought that she was doubting the authenticity of her identity as a holy knight. The conscience of heaven and earth, I have never really doubted this matter. I am just worried that the true identities of the witches will be exposed. However, Hawthorne was actually pleased with her misunderstanding. He then forced a laugh and awkwardly changed the subject, saying, your comrades are still unconscious and also in need of treatment, right?" Anno's smile faded, and he shook his head slightly. "They were just temporarily stunned by the fumes. Their lives are not in danger. Are there any other injured people elsewhere? Those who fought bravely tonight should be treated first." Hawthorne nodded. "Yes. There is also a commander of the Amazon female warriors. Her name, I forgot. But anyway, she was also hit by the leader of that cult and her condition is very bad now. Miss Anno, please come over," he said, taking Anno with him, stepping over the blood-soaked corpses of Kents, and walking over to Potter's side. Anno squatted down, reached out his hand, and the holy light of healing shone. The severely injured Porter slowly regained consciousness. As if some instinct for battle, she immediately woke up as soon as she opened her eyes, her body suddenly bouncing up, assuming a vigilant posture, looking around, and then exclaimed, "Kents is dead?" Anno had not had time to ask who Kents was when a flash of inspiration crossed Hawthorne's mind, and he hurriedly answered, "Yes, that summoner of monsters, colluder of cults, who attacked you and me, the mastermind behind tonight's bloodbath, Kents, has already been slain by my own hands." Anno glanced at him and thought to himself, this man is really eager for quick success and instant benefits. The battle has just ended, and he's already actively seeking credit here. Although he did play a significant role in tonight's events, in her opinion, this kind of behavior of actively seeking credit is not noble enough. Being humble, accommodating, and indifferent to fame and fortune is the way to go in life. In front of him, Potter was slightly stunned, but then he also realized and exclaimed loudly, "Great! This deceitful and wicked Kents from the shameless Shanasar Guild, who deceived and harmed innocent people for personal gain, has finally received the punishment he deserves." The two of them cooperated very well, and Anno was a little puzzled for a moment, feeling that these two people were a bit too excited. "Ah, I heard that on the night of the double moon, there was a fierce battle between the Amazonians and the Shanasar Guild, resulting in heavy casualties. So it's normal to be excited now, I suppose." Hawthorne, on the other hand, breathed a sigh of relief. This Amazonian person was somewhat cooperative, and both sides agreed on the same approach. In this way, the unfortunate deaths of Kents and these cultists have taken all the blame, and tonight's truth has also been concealed. Porter withdrew her combat stance, stood up straight, and both Hawthorne and Anno had to look up at her. Then they saw a forced smile on her face and she said, "I am Gail Porter, the director of the Information Science Department at Amazon Fisheries Company." Here is my business card. She spoke and handed over 2 small cards. For tonight's battle, may I know the names of this mage and this paladin? Anno then proceeded to introduce herself, and then both girls' eyes fell on Hawthorne. I am Nigel Hawthorne, he introduced himself, and Turquoise had already fabricated a new identity for him. I am a newly arrived priest at the monastery of the Goddess of Life, currently undergoing training with my sisters. Tonight, we sensed the presence of demons here and came together to purify the impurity. He said this, smiling at both of them, not worried that Anno would suddenly roar, heretic, or something, and then draw his sword to confront them. Times have changed. Since the holy catastrophe, the gods of order have reached a consensus to return the dominion of the material world to mortals. As a result, they have modified the original rules and established new ironclad laws. Since then, the profession of the Holy Knight, which originally required divine recognition to obtain power, has freed itself from religious constraints and gained freedom. Paladins no longer need to swear allegiance to the gods. Regardless of their beliefs or race, as long as they sincerely vow to save the suffering, aid the weak, or combat evil, and dedicate their lives to upholding order and justice, they can receive recognition from the new rules of order and obtain divine power. And if one violates their own oath, even if the actions of the Holy Knight are for the benefit of a deity from an order and justice faction, they will be stripped of their power by the newly revised rules jointly established by the gods. They will not be able to use any power until they have redeemed themselves from their sins. Therefore, the profession of a paladin is not only synonymous with powerful, but also synonymous with reliable. Now that Hawthorne has a legitimate identity, he can openly speak in front of this paladin, who has a different faith. Chapter 99, Amazonian People's Breeding Customs. Listening to him say this, Potterton suddenly realized, so that's why the nuns look familiar, we are actually neighbors. Anno also suddenly realized, so it's the Goddess of Life Church, no wonder. Saying this, her eyes immediately filled with sympathy, and the slight rejection that had arisen from Hawthorne's proactive self-promotion disappeared without a trace. Goddess of Life Church, how pitiful. Those who are still standing firm in that church, not abandoning their faith, are a group of truly steadfast believers, willing to endure endless suffering. The fact that the Goddess of Life was assassinated and her whereabouts remain unknown is well known throughout the port of Libel. After all, the church has been in decline for so many years, and these secrets cannot be kept hidden. Other churches, like the one where Anno is from, the Church of the God of Justice, may also be very humble, but at least their God is still there. They can see hope and, guided by the divine, they can walk the right path and make this world a better place. Even if they make mistakes, they can still seek redemption by repenting to the gods, thus allowing their souls to be saved. And the followers of the Goddess of Life, they have lost their guidance and the means of repentance and self-salvation. Whether it is judging the correctness of the path or practicing their own doctrines, they can only rely on themselves, so they live in great hardship, which also evokes great sympathy from other churches belonging to the order and justice camp. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Hawthorne. Anno extended his hand and shook it again. If it weren't for your timely arrival, all of this would have ended up in an irreparable and tragic situation. Your efforts should be remembered for their commitment to order and justice. Hawthorne shook hands with her, and then, Anno said to Porter, and you, madam, you have fought bravely to maintain order and justice in the South Harbor District. I admire your dedication. I will report truthfully on the contributions of both of you and all the soldiers, and the Silver District will give you the recognition you deserve. Hawthorne thought that the portion of the reward belonging to the Amazon women would probably be distributed, but the portion belonging to the monastery would most likely be swallowed up by the corrupt officials at the Nangang District Hall, maybe even completely. In the end, only a banner would be left to be sent to the monastery. However, he didn't really care about these accolades. Being able to safely purify the butterflies and shift all the blame onto the Shan Nasa Guild, he was already satisfied with tonight's gains. He nodded gently and smiled, saying, well then, I'll trouble Miss Anno. After saying this, he heard Adeline's voice in his ear, Master, we have searched the lumberyard thoroughly and confirmed that there are no traces left related to the butterfly. We can safely withdraw now. Excellent. Hawthorne secretly praised in his heart, then said, "Since the monsters have been eliminated, my sisters and I won't stay any longer. We are not professionals in searching, so let Miss Anno and her comrades handle it." Anno also didn't try to keep him, nodded lightly and said, "Thank you for your hard work tonight. Don't worry, leave the rest to us." After a pause, she added, "In the future, if there is a need for Father Hawthorne and the nuns to cooperate, we will visit the convent to seek your assistance. It's best not to have this kind of thing." Hawthorne thought to himself, but still had a smile on his face, "I will definitely do my best to cooperate." Saying this, he then waved his hand and said, "Miss Porter, Miss Anno, until we meet again in the future. Sisters, let's go." The nuns supported each other and quickly left after bidding farewell to each other. Looking at their backs, Anno sighed, "They are truly a selfless group of people." After saying goodbye to Porter, Anno turned around and went to wake up the members of her own team. Porter, on the other hand, walked all the way to the entrance of the lumberyard, looking at Hawthorne's back from a distance, his eyes flickering. Then, he quietly swallowed a mouthful of saliva. On the side, an Amazon woman came over and happened to see her actions. She immediately laughed and said, "Director, with this place being so smelly, how can you still have an appetite?" Potter chuckled lightly, "Does it have to be appetite to make me salivate?" Upon hearing this, the Amazonian raised an eyebrow and said, "Oh? Do you have a target now? Quickly tell me, I want to see what kind of species you are interested in." Since Amazon women abandoned the closed mode of primitive tribes and established their own kingdoms, and ventured into the world, the custom of polygamy has gradually been abolished. Nowadays, Amazonian women individually choose men they are interested in from the outside world, collect their seeds, and then return to their homeland to bear children. As for the custom of the boy returning to the boy's side and the girl staying to take care of herself, it is still preserved. By the way, these customs also face significant challenges. Some Amazon women, in pursuit of their careers, embrace infertilityism, while others develop true love with men from outside, just like the one-eyed cyclops of the Amazon tribe, now a one-eyed cripple, and the Amazon woman who helps him smuggle. Fortunately, these are still a minority for the time being. And Ms. Porter, the executive of the Amazon Fisheries Company, and her subordinates still maintain the tradition of seed collection. Listening to the subordinate's question, Porter didn't hide anything. He raised his chin slightly and gestured towards Hawthorne, who hadn't gone far yet, saying, "What do you think of that kid?" Her subordinate immediately restrained his smile. His appearance is not bad, but isn't he a bit too thin and weak?" She tried hard to recall her performance on the battlefield, her tone becoming more certain. "The daughters she had with him probably won't survive until the end of the trial, right?" Thinking that this was the man her boss had taken a liking to, she ultimately chose to end it with an uncertain tone. "Indeed, he has become somewhat thin and weak, but it is very likely due to malnutrition." Potter nodded and said, "The country's development in recent years has proven that as long as there is no lack of meat, eggs, and dairy products from a young age, even those with poor physical constitution can be fully compensated for. What I value is his ability to cast spells." Saying this, she swallowed again. "Have you noticed? His talent for casting spells. Judging by his appearance, he's at most 15 or 16 years old. To be able to wield such powerful magic at such a young age, one can only imagine his talent." Saying this, she even started to swallow inadequately, and some saliva flowed from the corners of her mouth. Her subordinate tilted his head slightly, expressing confusion. "Director, are you really coveting his magical talent, and not his body? Roll. Okay." Chapter 100, The Morning of the Butterfly. On the other hand, completely unaware that he had caught the attention of a strong and hungry Amazon woman, exhausted Hawthorne bid farewell to Porter and Anno, and returned to the monastery with the unconscious butterfly. He quickly took a shower without caring about anything else, and immediately fell asleep as soon as he lay down. The next day, early morning. When the sun in the east rose high, illuminating the earth with a bright light, the exhausted Hawthorne slowly woke up. Then as soon as I opened my eyes, I saw a butterfly with straight black silky long hair lying in the same bed as him, with a peaceful and serene expression, obviously still in a sweet dream. In the vast dormitory, she was the only one left, and the rest of the witches had long since disappeared. Realizing their intentions, a slight smile formed at the corner of Hawthorne's mouth. Obviously, this is a deliberate arrangement by Heidi and her friends, just so that he can get the butterfly's body and mind as soon as he wakes up in the morning. Oh, they have really worked hard. Thinking this way, but seeing the butterfly sleeping peacefully, he couldn't bear to disturb it for the time being. So he first adjusted his lying position, and then opened the system to check the gains he had obtained last night. Remaining purification points, 4829. Seeing this number, he raised an eyebrow instantly. Wow, the butterfly actually gave so much. He had over 3,600 points left before, and it cost 1,008 to level up. Now he has 4,008, so this is the reason. 2950 purification points. Nearly 3,000, a little more than the combined total of purifying Yuta and Emerald Silk. Sigh. How strong would her true power be in her prime state? At this thought, he couldn't help but feel a little scared. Fortunately, at that time, the butterfly was already in a confused state of mind. Instead of honing her own spellcasting abilities, she went on to develop some cult and even managed to create a total of 40 to 50 spellcasters, with each member of the cult possessing spellcasting abilities within a span of 2 weeks. The power is dispersed, so it is easy to be broken by various attacks. Moreover, even so, last night still relied on the vague impression of Heidi and Yuta by the butterfly, deceived her, so she could almost purify herself at no cost, making her lose most of her power, and in a rage, she used magic to kill her own 8 guards. If not for this, it's hard to say who would have won or lost last night. Fortunately, no matter how many twists and turns, I still managed to laugh in the end. Hawthorne couldn't help but secretly rejoice, then looked at his own gains, feeling overjoyed. Ah, more than 4,000 purification points, it's already enough for me. To ascend to level 2 in the monastery, you need 1,000 points. To ascend from level 4 to level 5, you need 3,008. Okay, it's simply not enough money. He quickly calculated the account and his face instantly fell as if he had been doused with cold water. Level 5 is a watershed, so the purification points required to advance from level 4 to level 5 far exceed the sum of all previous levels. After reaching level 5, spellcasters truly begin to master some powerful spells, setting themselves apart from ordinary people. For example, the fireball spell with a blast radius of 25 meters, capable of instantly destroying a large mansion, the acceleration spell that increases one's speed fourfold, or the deceleration spell that reduces it to 1/4 of its original speed. In addition, those non-caster professions will also gradually obtain their own core abilities, with their combat power more than doubled. Forget it, it seems that this level 5 is not so easy to upgrade. He sighed and temporarily gave up on this idea. After all, once he raised the monastery to level 2, he would definitely have to prioritize pointing out all the level 2 monastery buildings. When he calculated it, the upgrade purification points would immediately be insufficient. Purifying a powerful witch like this butterfly only gives less than 3,000 purification points. How is this enough? Forget it, no more complaints. Let's wait patiently for the next witch's night. The 6 witches who have already been purified should be able to provide me with a large amount of purification points, right? Sigh, but if it's like this, my own front line will be stretched very long. He thought this way, looking at the purification points in front of him, but did not spend them immediately. At this moment, a tremor came from beside him. Hawthorne turned his head and saw the butterfly open her pair of dark eyes, looking confusedly at the ceiling. Hawthorne then smiled slightly and said, "Good morning, butterfly." "Good morning, master," butterfly responded subconsciously, her voice carrying a hint of tenderness. Then, recalling what she had done last night, she suddenly looked flustered and said, "Master, I." Speaking, she was about to get up, just like last time with Yuta, and kowtow to apologize to him. So the neatly covered bedding that covered her delicate body was slightly lifted, revealing a large area of beautiful skin without any clothes, the white and tender twin peaks swaying slightly, the flat lower abdomen fully exposed, and even the mysterious area below, were all faintly visible in Hawthorne's line of sight. Hawthorne extended a finger and pressed it against her lips, whispering, "It's okay, it's all in the past. The current you has been reborn, and you are completely different from before. Naturally, you don't have to inherit the sins of the past." The butterfly looked at him pitifully, with shimmering tears in its eyes. After a while, it nodded slightly and said with teary eyes, But as she lowered her head, she discovered that she was completely naked now, and still in the same bed as Hawthorne. The latter naturally had no cover, and even had a physiological reaction due to just waking up in the morning. Because she now uncovered the blanket, everything was exposed in front of her eyes. "Ah!" The girl's shy voice is so pleasant. The butterfly quickly shrinks and wraps itself in a blanket, her pretty face turning red. She dares not look into his eyes and says, "Master." Compared to Heidi's plumpness, Yuta's petite figure, and Cui Bai's charm, Butterfly's body seems to lack distinctive features. Her body always has clear lines, but whether it's her chest, waist, hips, or legs, they are just average between fullness and slimness, so it seems that there are not many characteristics. However, with long, jet black and silky hair, and a serene and gentle face, she naturally possesses a kind of gentleness that only a well-bred lady would have, regardless of how much desire there may be. Simply because of her beauty, she captivates people. And at this moment, she was wrapped in a quilt, shyly covering her delicate body. This startled expression made Hawthorne unable to help but chuckle. He reached out his hand and gently pinched her little nose, then laughed and said, "The sun is up high, it's time to wake up." Speaking, he himself got out of bed first, naked, without feeling the slightest bit embarrassed, and changed clothes in front of the butterfly like this. As the saying goes, when one is well fed and warm, they think of lust. He fought hard last night until the early hours, and slept in so late today. He's already starving, so he doesn't have any desire in that aspect at all. All he can think about is having a good meal first.